1,300 startups exist in Ukraine right now, and some of them are already in kind of suspended mode.
It's a bit like how I might write a job application in some ways. You want to target the pitch to the individual journalist. So for example, I primarily cover deep tech and AI. So if it's a pitch that is about a Ukrainian startup that does AI or deep tech, send it to me. But if it's one of my colleagues who does something in mobility, for example, you'll have much better chance of sending it to them.
So, Thomas, what brings you to Ukraine right now?
I was invited by the organizers of this event, and it seemed like a unique opportunity to see a developing startup ecosystem in obviously very challenging circumstances. So yeah, from a journalist's perspective, it's fascinating.
Have you been covering Ukrainian startups before?
A little bit, only really since the war, and obviously that's kind of opened my eyes, like a lot of journalists, to both the importance of the tech ecosystem in Ukraine, and also like the potential of it, both in wartime, whether it's combating cyber threats, for example, but also for the future and rebuilding the economy of Ukraine.
There is a lot of interest to Ukrainian companies, but obviously at the same time, if we would talk about startup ecosystem, a lot of those, they actually went into some kind of suspended mode. Sure. Because of war, but still, what you see here in Ukraine so far? What is your observation since the war started?
I think deep tech is an area in which Ukraine has a lot of talent. From speaking to people who work in the sector, it seems like the technical skills are very high here. People have told me maybe the more entrepreneurial aspects still need to develop a bit more, and yeah, also from what I understand, like most of the world, a lot of the startup founders here, their objective is to go to Silicon Valley, and I suppose that's the same around the world, really.
What do you think in general about our people launching startups right now during the war? Is it possible at all?
From the people I've spoken to, it seems possible, but incredibly challenging. But I suppose if from my perspective, working in the media, it makes for more interesting stories, important stories as well. And I think particularly both the personal stories of people launching and running businesses during such challenging, unique times, but also the potential benefits that technology can bring to the war effort. For example, I've spoken to a data analytics company based in Ukraine that uses satellite imagery to try and monitor developments during the war, and that for me is fascinating, but it's also can have a huge impact on the sort of the struggle that's going on right now.
Я сподіваюся, вам подобається контент, який ви зараз переглядаєте. Мені, як автору нового YouTube каналу, дуже важливо почути від вас зворотній відгук. Тому залишайте коментарі, також ставте вподобайки, якщо вам подобається це відео, і не забудьте підписатись на канал. Саме підписка гарантує те, що цей канал буде рости в переглядах, і ми отримаємо більше і більше молодих технологічних підприємців в Україні. During the war in Ukraine, what is the right way to do a pitch that would attract the interest from a journalist?
Sure. I can only speak from my perspective personally, but I think it's probably similar for most journalists, and it's really the story. It's not necessarily like you've got however much in funding, you have this many people in your team, you've got this backer from whatever venture capitalist. It's really the story of what the startup does, how it came together, and the future plans. So if I receive something in my inbox that the subject line is obviously the first thing I see. So if that strikes me and it's succinct and it's almost tells a story in a very short few words, then that's what will make me intrigued. And then the content, I think brevity, if it's a very long email, it makes you sort of automatically to kind of tune out a little bit. But if it's a story, again, I think if it's a story that's relevant to the war, then that is automatically going to make me interested. If it's something just we're in Ukraine, but we're doing something that's, another company anywhere else in the world could be maybe not so interesting.
Yeah, and basically the subject line could be like, we are making 1 million ARR during the war in Ukraine when all the team in Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that would definitely attract my interest for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what is important also to mention to our audience is that you definitely guys need to research your journalists so that these people are actually interested not only in the war,
Sure.
but also in the subject. What is the business you are doing, and is journalist covering this at all? Because I think there are a lot of expectations that, okay, this person writes for TheNextWeb. This means that I can send him a startup idea. But if we speak about startups in Ukraine, then probably do you know what is the statistics here? It's like 1,300 startups exist in Ukraine right now, and some of them are already in kind of suspended mode. So it's super micro number to myself, and it means that people in here, they think that if they send this email outbound, they would expect that they will be spotted. But the problem is that we need to understand better who are those journalists behind their articles, and if they actually interested in the topic of the business itself.
Absolutely, that's a great point. It's a bit like how I might write a job application in some ways. You want to target the pitch to the individual journalist. So for example, I primarily cover deep tech and AI. So if it's a pitch that is about a Ukrainian startup that does AI or deep tech, send it to me. But if it's one of my colleagues who does something in mobility, for example, you'll have much better chance of sending it to them. But I think also a lot of the time, I get a lot of emails that are clearly
How many
generic
emails you kind of check every morning?
I mean, I get like I don't know, maybe 100 a day.
100 a day?
Yeah.
So you understand, you are always challenged and in competition.
Yeah, exactly. So I think tailoring it and personalizing it is a really good idea. And I get so many generic emails that are just, a press release, and it's the same email that however 100 journalists could be receiving, and that is much less likely to attract my interest.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. How was your experience so far in Ukraine?
It's been great. I only arrived last night. It's much more, it seems like being in I wouldn't have guessed I'm in a country at war at the moment, but obviously that's where I am in Ukraine. We got
used to that. I would agree. Like air raids, they used to come off like every another day. Right now, we had air raid about a few hours ago.
Morning.
How did you feel about it?
I mean, I was a little bit nervous initially, but all of the other attendees were just like, didn't even react. But I think we were already in a place for shelter, so we were in a safe place.
Yeah. There was no way to run, right?
yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, but no, everyone's been very welcoming, and it's very interesting. It's my first trip to Ukraine, so learning a lot about the country, and I suppose this city in particular it feels very European to me.
Thank you so much for supporting Ukrainian ecosystem and coming here in person. So hope to see you around.
Pleasure.
Maybe during the peaceful times.
Yeah, hope so. It's nice to meet you. Cheers.
Nice to meet you too.